Fox News Alert, the Pentagon now saying 2 U.S. Army soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan, a third injured. They were part of forces fighting ISIS in the same province where we dropped the so-called mother of all bombs earlier this month. Their names have not been yet released. In fact, we just received a statement from the Pentagon and the top commander there in Afghanistan on this. Officials tell Fox that 18 ISIS militants were killed in that firefight. Joining us now, General Keane, a retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and a Fox News military analyst. And so here's part of the statement, General Keane, from General Nicholson. The fight against ISIS is important for the world, but sadly it is not without sacrifice. I guess that's true.
That's so true. I mean, we've been at this almost 16 years now in Afghanistan, and certainly that's a tragic death of our soldiers there. And in a way, Afghanistan is sort of a forgotten war, you know, in the minds of the American people, because President Obama chose never to talk about it. He never told the American people why it's important, why we're really there. So it's sad. What's going on here, so our audience understands, is ISIS has a bona fide safe haven there. And whenever they have safe havens where they group and they protect themselves, we've got to crush it. It was the major lesson coming out of 9/11, that we did not crush the al-Qaeda safe haven in Afghanistan when we knew it existed there. And we got 9/11 as a result of it. So whenever that forms, we've got to go in and deal with it. And that's what we're doing here.
Why didn't the mother of all bombs do that?
Well, it killed most of them, but probably not all of them. And we had to go back in that area to get them out of there. I don't know who these soldiers are, whether they were advisors or whether this is a special operations raid, but certainly the Afghan army bears the brunt of this task to take that safe haven down, and we've got to stick with it. ISIS, Khorasan, if they form, that is not just a threat to the region, it's also a threat to the United States.
Do you think this current administration is doing enough to talk about Afghanistan and explain our priorities there as a nation?
I think what's happening, that's a great question, Jenna, is General McMaster, the National Security Advisor, and General Mattis were just there in the last couple of weeks. I think what's happening in the White House right now, Afghanistan is on the table, they're going through the options, and sadly, after 16 years, we're not winning this war. As a matter of fact, the Taliban have the initiative, they have the momentum operationally. It's a stalemate, as General Nicholson said, in the sense that Taliban cannot take over the government, but the government and its army cannot defeat the Taliban.
When I'm hearing you speak, I can't help but think about, again, the mother of all bombs that we talk so much about. And maybe it's because I'm a wife of a veteran. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, General Keane, but I have to ask you this question. Let's not drop just one of those bombs. Let's go drop 100 of them in the area where all these guys are hiding out, where we know where they are. We know that they're bad. We know that there's not a lot of civilians. And let's do it once and for all. Why aren't we doing that?
Well, I think they would if they could, and in other, if it made sense tactically. I mean, obviously Nicholson had a heck of a problem on his hand. He had these guys hiding in caves and old mines, as opposed to putting soldiers in there. They tried. He asked the Air Force, do you have a solution for me? And they gave him a solution. I suspect they're out of that immediate area now because they know they're going to get another bomb.
I just want to point out that a soldier was killed in this area, and a few days later, that's when we dropped that particular bomb. So I'll be curious to see what is the after effect after this news. General Nicholson is the same one that was requesting perhaps more soldiers to go into Afghanistan. That's something that's being considered by Secretary Mattis. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, he requested more advisors, but that will not be decisive. To change the situation on the ground, we're going to have to give the Afghan National Army all the enablers we took away from them. Intelligence, communications, Apache helicopters. We stripped them of all of that.
What does that mean,
under
General Keane? Are we talking tens of thousands of soldiers?
We're talking thousands more, but not tens of thousands. And, as we've spoken before, Jenna, in Pakistan are 2 sanctuaries that the Afghan Taliban reside at.
Right.
As long as that exists, you cannot defeat this insurgency.
It's so frustrating to talk about this over and over again because, again, we know where the bad guys are.
Right.
It's been a question of political will to go in this area in some respects and get them out. And so that's frustrating to underscore, but I want to underscore that for our viewers. I also want to mention what's going on at the UN right now. It's not connected directly to this, but Russia's connected to a lot of different things. And we know about Russian mischief in the region, particularly in Afghanistan. In this sense, what we're watching at the UN is Ambassador Nikki Haley addressing Russia's denial that Syria used chemical weapons on its own people. Go back and forth on this, General Keane. What are your observations about what's happening at the UN and what the actual impact of it could be?
Listen, Ambassador Nikki Haley is an absolute rising star in the Trump administration. I'm so impressed with her. She calls out the UN when they're not when they're trampling on human interest or U.S. interest. She calls out the Russians for the war criminals that they are in backing Assad. She calls them out for the fact that they have been bombing civilians themselves. And the gall that the Russians have to come after us over this Syrian strike we made, that somehow there was something wrong with that strike, when they have systematically and purposely target civilians. The major air campaign that's going on in Syria is being conducted by the Russians, not the Syrians. They purposely bombed underground hospitals. That is a war crime. They're the only people in Syria that have the bombs to do that. These people are what we have always said they are. Putin is a thug. He's a killer, and he's also a war criminal. Now, our politicians may not want to say that, but that's the truth of it.
Well, it's good to shed a little light. General Keane, thank you very much.